Hello, this is Teresa Lawson. I am a functional nutrition and lifestyle practitioner from Illinois, and my website is healthyparentshappyfamilies.com. I encourage and invite each of you to look at my website. I have several free webinar workshops on how to detox our bodies, different topics about healthy foods, healthy oils, the importance of eating eggs and including them in our diet if possible. And so I just encourage you to check out my website, and all of the videos there that you find are free. And I encourage you to share with others. And today I'm going to be talking about lazy woman's canning. And the reason I'm calling it this is because this is a very easy method of preserving vegetables and fruits that is very simple. It doesn't require any kind of cooking on the stove, and I think you'll find it quite interesting. Now, one of the things that science is showing more and more is the importance of a healthy microbiome for our digestion. We have different types of microbiome for different types of our body. Our oral microbiome is different than the microbiome on our skin, and then we also have another type of microbiome for the different body systems, each of the different body systems. But the one I'm focusing on today is the microbiome of the gut, because that is where we digest our food. And in order to have a healthy digestion, you have to have a healthy microbiome, which means that you need to have the proper bacteria in your gut so that your body is absorbing the nutrients from your food. And these type of preservation that I'm going to be sharing with you today increases the nutrient value of the food, and it also provides a lot of prebiotics and probiotics to the body, which helps to build the microbiome. So once again, my name's Teresa Lawson. My website's healthyparentshappyfamilies.com. And I am the mom of 11. My husband and I live on a farm, and this is our big, beautiful family. This was taken in 2016 at our 40th wedding anniversary. At this point, we had 16 grandchildren, but since then we have added 3 more. So this is May 6th of 2020 when I'm recording this, and we now have 19 grandchildren and 2 more coming, one in August and one in October of this year. So yes, we are a growing family, and I homeschooled our kids for over 30 years. We raised organic gardens. I still do that, still raise organic gardens. We have our own chickens. We have our own fresh eggs. My husband has raised cattle in the past, and we've had the cattle butchered and put the meat in our freezer. We just tried to live a really healthy lifestyle, and I really wanted to avoid medications with our family. Having a background in nursing, I knew there were a lot of side effects with medications, and this all led me on a journey to better health and better wellness for my family. And you can hear more and learn more about that at my website, healthyparentshappyfamilies.com. So we're going to take this in 4 parts. Part 1 will be about making sauerkraut. Part 2, pickles, green beans, and other vegetables. Part 3 will be lemons and citrus. And Part 4 will be focused on kombucha. So let's start with Part 1, and we're going to talk a little bit about sauerkrauts. I am going to include a handout that will have the recipes for these different fermented foods on them. And so that if you're looking at my website, that will be found below this video, the PDF handout with the recipes. Otherwise, if you are watching this video presentation live with a group, Someone will be there to hand out the recipes for you. So either way, you will have access to the recipes that I'm going to include. So as you can see, for the fermented the sauerkraut, you will need a 1 quart jar, or if you have a big family and you want to make 2 quart jar, half-gallon jar, that's fine too. I kind of prefer that for myself, even though there's only 4 of us that live in our home now. I like to make this sauerkraut in a bigger jar. 1 large head of cabbage will fit into a 1 quart jar. So these items I'm giving you here are all for 1 quart jar of sauerkraut. And you can use either purple or green cabbage, a tablespoon of salt, and 2 tablespoons of whey, and this is optional. The whey is something that can help with the fermentation process, help speed it up a little bit, but it is not absolutely necessary. So what you're going to do is you're going to wash your cabbage and core it. You're going to take the core out of it. You're going to finely chop it up. The finer, the better. You don't want to get it so fine that it's like minced. I tried that once and it didn't work out very well. So you want to finely chop it, put it in a large bowl, and then you're going to combine it with the salt and the whey. And you're going to work the salt and the whey into the cabbage with your hands. Just rub it around, work it in real well. Then you're going to set it aside for 30 to 60 minutes. And when it's sitting, juices will start to be released. And it will give a wet appearance to the cabbage. But after about 30 to 60 minutes, you can pound the cabbage down thoroughly with something called a kraut pounder. And I'm going to show you a picture of that on the next page. The next slide. And you want to do that about every 30 minutes. You want to pound the cabbage down really thoroughly, about every 30 minutes. Do that about 4 times. And this is to help really get the cabbage to break down, get the vegetable fiber to break down, and get more juices flowing from your cabbage. After you've done this 4 times, about every 30 minutes, and you've done it 4 times, then you can spoon this into a quart jar, and you're going to use your kraut pounder to press it down so that the cabbage becomes submersed in the juices. You're not going to add any liquid to it. If you continue to press down this cabbage, eventually you will have enough juice to cover your cabbage. And you want to continue pressing this down with your kraut pounder in the jar, probably about every 30 minutes or so, until you have enough juice to cover that cabbage. And then you can place a glass weight on the top of it to keep it submerged, because you want to keep your vegetable, your cabbage, beneath the surface of the liquid. That is what keeps mold from growing on it. And you want to press this down 1 to 2 times a day for 3 weeks with your kraut pounder. And you're gonna let it for 3 days. Then you're gonna keep a towel around it to keep it dark, or you can keep it in a cabinet, a cupboard, so it's out of the light. Excuse me. And you're gonna let this ferment for anywhere from 1 to 3 weeks. So when you take it and pound down or press down your cabbage each day for the first 3 days or so, you're going to taste it each time just to see, how it's fermenting. And then you check it once a day after that. And if you feel that it's not covered well enough with the juice, you can press it down again with your kraut pounder. And you want to leave it in the dark and keep it submersed underneath the juice for anywhere from 1 to 3 weeks. And you check on it probably every day or 2. I wouldn't let it go more than 48 hours without checking on it to make sure that the cabbage is staying underneath the juice and that it's all submersed. And when it tastes like what you want it to taste like, then you can remove it. from the cabinet, put it in the refrigerator. The taste is all going to be up to you. It's going to be up to you to determine whether or not it's fermented enough. Some people like it more fermented than others, so it's going to be totally up to you. The fermentation process will increase the fiber, the probiotic content in your food, in your sauerkraut. So this is just a picture of me pounding cabbage, and what I did here, instead of buying a head of cabbage and cutting it up, I actually purchased a big bag of shredded purple and green cabbage and carrots from Sam's Club. And I just used that. And it made about a quart jar full of sauerkraut. But the really nice part was it was already shredded, and it had carrots. It had cabbage, two kinds of cabbage in it. And what I like to do, too, sometimes is I like to chop up 3 or 4 cloves of garlic, and I add that to my cabbage as well. I stir that in really well, and I just love the flavor. It's not necessary to put the garlic in there, but it does boost the nutrients in your sauerkraut, and I just think it offers a lovely flavor. I love garlic. To the right, you can see a kraut pounder. Mine looks a little bit different than that, but that's basically what you're going to use to pound down your cabbage and get the juices all coming out of it. And if you have another tool that you think would work just as well, you're welcome to use that. But a kraut pounder comes in really handy. I bought one because I do make sauerkraut quite often. And this is a couple of samples of what my sauerkraut looks like. The one on the left has, that was from the bag that I just described to you that I purchased at Sam's, with purple cabbage, green cabbage, and shredded carrot in it. And that's how it looked after I got it into I used a 2-quart jar, and that's how it looked in my 2-quart jar. You can see I'm pounding it down there, pressing it down with my kraut pounder, and you can see all the juice on the top, kind of bubbly looking, and that's normal. And then on the right, that particular batch on the right was done with green cabbage, and I shredded up a carrot and some garlic, fresh garlic, and put that in there. And so that's how it looked, beautiful orange color. And as you can see on the top of that jar, there's this little green, kind of like a button sticking up on the top. And I'm going to be talking a little bit more about that later on in this presentation. Once again, here's another picture. This is green cabbage, completely green cabbage, the sauerkraut you see on the right. That's a jar of green cabbage that I made. Now, that's a quart-sized jar, and as you can see, it is full all the way up to the rim. And that was with 1 head of cabbage. It filled the jar. But you can see it looks very much like the sauerkraut that you would buy in the store. And that particular batch was not completely fermented yet. I had to leave that for another week or 2, I think, after that picture was taken. But once again, I added garlic, shredded garlic to that one. So it can be really versatile. I know some people like to add a little bit of dill seed to theirs, and that's fine too. Okay, so now we're going to talk about our second portion, fermenting pickles, green beans, and other vegetables. And first of all, I want to share with you our simple brine recipe. To make a brine, you're going to use 1 quart of purified water. Do not use distilled water. Do not use tap water. Be sure you use purified water, which would be like your reverse osmosis water. because if you use well water or tap water or distilled water, your vegetables might get really mushy. So you want to add 6 teaspoons of sea salt to 1 quart of purified water. I know that sounds like a lot, but it helps with this preservation process, this fermenting process. And you mix it up really well, and then you just let it sit to dissolve and to clarify. So this was right after I put the salt in, and it's a little cloudy looking. But if you mix it real well and you just leave it sit on your counter for a little bit, maybe 5 minutes or so, it will clarify. The salt will all dissolve. And it's important you don't use iodized salt. I've never done this with Himalayan salt, like pink salt. I don't know how it would turn out. So all I can tell you from my own experience is using sea salt works very well. And you want to use this in fermentation of all your vegetables except your sauerkraut. And you can keep your leftover brine in a jar with the lid on for future ferments. So I usually have leftover brine, and I keep it in my refrigerator or even on the counter. Sometimes I'll leave it on the counter in the kitchen. It's not going to go bad or anything because it's very salty. So that's your simple brine recipe. This is a fermentation kit that I highly recommend you consider purchasing. I purchased mine on Amazon. It's from, this particular one is from Silaware, and you can see it has those little rubber lids like I was just talking about with that picture, that previous slide of the sauerkraut. These little rubber tops that you put on the jars, they're meant for a wide mouth jar, and they have a little tiny hole in the top. So when you're fermenting foods, it's creating gas. By the way, I forgot to mention, when you make the sauerkraut, if you don't use one of these kind of lids on there, you need to make sure, if you're using a canning lid, that you burp it every day, at least once a day. You open the lid and let the gas out, and then you can tighten it again. When you have these lids, these rubber lids on there, on your jar, you don't have to do that because they have a little tiny hole in the top and the gas can escape. So I really recommend you purchase a box of these, this fermentation kit, and this comes with glass weights, which you put on the top of your vegetables or your sauerkraut to hold it down under the liquid. It comes with these silicone airlock lids. And then there's also some really cool tags that you can write down the item in your jar and put the tag on there. I haven't used my tags for anything yet. They're still in the box, and I bought this well over a year ago, this kit. So that's an option, but I do want to encourage you to consider the purchase of at least one of these fermentation kits. Okay, so this is the recipe for the actual fermentation of the vegetables. You fill a 1 to 2 quart jar with peeled and sliced vegetables. Now this is going to be carrots, obviously, but this is the same method you'll use no matter what vegetables you're going to ferment. And sometimes I'll be really careful about putting the carrots in. They'll be all like real straight and neat, like what you see back here, because it's a smaller jar. But other times I just kind of shove them all down in there. It doesn't look quite as pretty, but I add dill to mine, and any amount. You could put whatever amount of dill you want to put in there. I add garlic cloves in between the layers of carrots as you're filling the jar. Of course, you peel the carrots first and you slice them up. And then you cover your carrots with your brine, and you add a glass weight on the top to keep the carrots submerged under the brine. And you ferment it for a minimum of 3 weeks. So with carrots, it takes longer, a minimum of 3 weeks with carrots, because they get, they're very crispy and they have a lot of sugar in them. It takes a long time to ferment them. I want to warn you, though, that because carrots do have a lot of sugar in them, more than you would think, they do create a lot of bubbles and a lot of gas. And so if you're not using one of those special little silicone lids with the hole in it, you're going to have to make sure you burp your jar, open your lid on your jar at least once a day during the fermentation process, because otherwise you might have an explosion. Now these jars that I'm showing here, the one picture on the left are a little neater. You can see the garlic in the bottom, and you can see the dill floating around in there. And I did put the carrots in much more neatly in these 2 jars. These are 2-quart jars. And as you can see on the top, I do have those silicone lids for the gas. And if you look at the jar on the right, I just took an up-close picture of one of those 2 jars that you see on the left. You can see all the bubbles at the top. This is, I think, maybe 3 or 4 days into the fermentation process. And you can just see all the bubbles coming up. And that's perfectly normal. You're going to have those bubbles coming up because that shows that your vegetables are in the process of the fermentation. So that's a good thing. And I do have a glass weight on the top of my carrots to hold them under the brine. You can also use a different kind of jar if you don't want to use a canning jar. This jar on the right is not a canning jar. You can use a fancy jar with a fancy lid. It doesn't really matter. Just be sure that you burp your jar once a day. If you're not going to use a canning jar with a silicone lid with a hole in it, just make sure you burp it at least once a day. Now, I love to make fermented radishes because even if my family doesn't like raw radishes in particular, I do put them in salads, but they like the radishes after they've been fermented, and I put them in salad. I use them in salad. And you can see there's a little bit of garlic floating. Well, it's not floating yet. I don't have the liquid on this particular jar yet, but you can see the garlic in there. You can see that I poured the dill in there. It's kind of the dill seeds kind of down on the bottom. And then you fill up your jar with your brine, and you cover your radishes completely. And I did put a weight on top. As you can see on the jar on the right there, the far right, the taller jar, there is a weight. I don't know if you could see that in there, but there is a weight, a glass weight on the top of my radishes to hold them down underneath the brine. Very simple, very, very simple. That's why I love this form of quote-unquote lazy woman canning. You can also can other vegetables. You can also ferment other vegetables. Of course, on the left here we have banana peppers and jalapeno peppers. And on the right you can see that I canned them, I fermented them in a fancier jar. And I did have to burp this jar while they were in the fermenting process. I really love to ferment these peppers, especially banana peppers, because they are so delicious in salad. Oh my gosh, they remind me of pepperoncini that you would buy in the store and pay so much money for. They're just so good. They're so tasty. And as you can see in this jar on the right, I have minced garlic in the bottom. I actually used minced garlic in that particular batch. And I layered the banana peppers on the bottom, and then I put some sweet peppers on top. And they are just so delicious, and they keep for a long time, especially the banana peppers and the jalapeno peppers. If you ferment them, and then after, usually within 4 days to a week, they're ready to put in the refrigerator. And those, I can keep those literally, the banana peppers or jalapeno peppers, literally will keep in my refrigerator for 5-6 months. They don't get mushy at all. They retain their crispness and their flavor, and they're so, so delicious to add to your salad. And they're so healthy. They're so good for your microbiome. On the left, we have traditional pickles, cucumbers. You just simply make sure to cut both ends off of your cucumbers and scrub them well, clean them well, rinse them off well, get all the soap off of them. But make sure you cut both ends off of them because there is an enzyme that grows or that's in the flowering end of the cucumber. And I just like to cut both ends off just to make sure I'm not having any of that enzyme in my final pickle ferment. And the reason for that is because the enzyme prevents them from staying crisp. The enzyme actually will cause your pickles to turn mushy. And as you can see in that picture, I once again have my garlic in the bottom of the jar, and I also have dill in there, just like you traditionally would use when you make cucumbers or pickles on the stove when you go through all the cooking process. On the right side, we have green beans. Once again, I have garlic in there. I know you can't see it in that picture, but I do have garlic cloves in there. And when you put your garlic in your ferment, make sure that you crush it just a little bit to release the juices from it. And I also have dill in those beans, those green beans. All of these vegetables that you're learning about here, generally after like 3 to 4 days, they're ready to put in the refrigerator, and then you can start eating them. Just check them every day after about the first 48 hours. You can open it up, take one out, and take a bite of it and see if it tastes the way that you want it to taste. Now, the cucumbers will not last as long in the refrigerator. Once you have them fermented to the point where you like the taste and you do put it in the refrigerator, I would not let them sit in there more than 2 to 4 weeks, because they do gradually start to get a little bit on the mushy side. So you want to eat those. If you want to eat them crispy, you want to eat them a little bit faster before a 2-week period is up. Another thing that I like to do with the cucumbers that do get a little bit on the mushy side, once again, I like to cut them up, chop them up small, and put them in tuna salad, chicken salad, or just sprinkle them in a tossed green salad. And here on the left is the finished product of what your radishes are going to look like. The water will turn a beautiful pink or red color because literally the outside red coloring on your radishes will come off and go into the water, and it looks really beautiful. On the right side there, you can see 3 of my jars of different kinds of veggies that I have fermented. The one jar on the left there, you can see that there's whole dill in the bottom. In the summer months, I like to use whole dill from dill weed, right directly from the plant. And if you can find anybody that's got dill weed growing that you could buy from them, it's really worth it to just buy the heads of dill, or else maybe a friend would be kind enough to maybe even give you some. I know I have a friend who used to live near me, and she would just beg me to take dill from her because it was growing like weeds all around her house. And I couldn't get it to grow near my house for the life of me. I tried planting it all different places around my house, in my garden, and it just would not grow properly. So I was happy to take dill off of her hands, and it's very easy to dry dill. Just leave it lay out on a table on some newspaper for anywhere from 3 days to a week. And when you feel that it's dry enough, you put it in, a gallon-sized freezer bag. And in the middle there, you could see a jar of Brussels sprouts. I call them baby cabbages because they're just so cute. They look to me like baby cabbages. But I did experiment a little bit. You can experiment with lots of different vegetables. I tried fermenting some Brussels sprouts, and I probably should have let them ferment longer, like carrots, because I think Brussels sprouts probably just have to ferment for a very long time, probably a month or more. But in my impatience, I started trying to use them after like a week or two, and they were really, really crispy and difficult to chew, kind of chewy. So I ended up cooking them up and putting them in a casserole dish that I was making But in any case, you can experiment with any kind of vegetables. Here again, just some more of my samples of fermented vegetables. I try not to let any vegetables go to waste. If I'm not going to use them right away, and I have lots of veggies from my garden every year, I'm not going to use them right away. I usually either chop them up, put them in the freezer in little sandwich bags, or I ferment them. And here is a sample of my fermenting spree. one day fermenting spree. I spent several hours, cutting up vegetables, and I had a couple of quarts of carrots also that I processed with the brine. But it only took me a couple hours to do all this. And on the right there, you can see zucchini. That's zucchini squash sliced up. Now, I must tell you that from my own experience, zucchini and yellow squash, they get pretty mushy pretty fast. So I'm not really recommending that you ferment zucchini, at least not in slices. I've never done it just slicing small zucchini the long way, lengthwise. I could try that experiment and see how the zucchini would turn out. And also, I don't have any cherry tomatoes in this picture, but I have done cherry tomatoes. And I find if you use a toothpick to poke a little hole in each cherry tomato, it works much better because there's the outer casing on the tomato prevents it from fermenting properly. So it's good to poke a little tiny hole in each one of your cherry tomatoes. But I do have a grandson who absolutely loves the cherry tomatoes. It's funny because different grandchildren like different ferments. I know one of my grandsons loves the carrots, fermented carrots, and one of my grandsons loves the tomatoes, the little cherry tomatoes. I have another grandson who loves the garlic, and I have another grandson who loves the cucumbers. So it's different for all of them. But yeah, ferments are great for kids. Try to get your kids hooked on fermented vegetables for snacks. Now we're going to talk about fermenting lemons and citrus. And here is your recipe. You're going to use 3 lemons. Now this won't quite fill a 1-quart jar, but probably about 2/3 full, half to 2/3 full. 3 lemons scrubbed, and then juice from 3 lemons, 3 other lemons, 1 bay leaf, 8 cardamom pods, 1.5 teaspoons of whole cloves, 2 cinnamon sticks, and 6 tablespoons of sea salt. And what you're going to do is cut your lemons in quarters, and you're going to leave them attached at the bottom, leave the peel attached. And then you sprinkle 1 tablespoon of salt over each lemon. I know it sounds like a lot, but when these are done fermenting, the salt, it just combines with the citrus, and it doesn't taste salty. You sprinkle a tablespoon of salt over each lemon, rub it in really well, and then you pack your lemons inside the jar, and you press them down with a kraut pounder, and this releases the juices from those lemons that you've cut. Then you add crushed cardamom, your cloves, your bay leaf, and your cinnamon. And you mix lemon juice with the rest of the salt, the other 3 tablespoons of salt. And then you pour you pour that over the contents of the jar, and you will probably have to add some additional water to cover your lemons. Just be sure you use purified water. And then you place a weight on top to submerge your lemons, and you leave it at room temperature for 1 to 4 weeks. You want to keep it wrapped up with a towel so that it's in the dark, and you want to burp it every day unless you have one of the silicone lids with the little hole in the top. And the lemons are ready when the peels are soft and pliable. And then at that point, you can refrigerate them. And you can get really creative with how you want to use your lemon peels, your citrus peels. You can do this with limes. You can do this with oranges. You can do this with lemons, any kind of citrus. And here's a picture of a jar of lemons that I fermented. You can see the glass weight in the top of the jar. It's kind of flipped sideways a little bit in there. And this was in the refrigerator, so it's kind of a cloudy looking brine. But I left mine ferment for over a week, and then I put it in the refrigerator. Okay, so part 4 is kombucha. I don't know how many of you have ever heard of kombucha, but it's becoming a very common type of a drink that you can buy in supermarkets. And the nice part is you can make it way less expensive, way cheaper than yourself than having to buy it in a supermarket. I do have 2 continuous kombucha maker pots, and the reason I have these is because one of these has a Jun SCOBY in it, and I will be talking about that in a moment. The one on the left, the blue one, has a Jun SCOBY, and the one on the right has a regular kombucha SCOBY. So I make 2 different kinds of kombucha. I make Jun kombucha, which is made with green tea and raw honey, and I make regular black tea kombucha, which is made with black tea and sugar. So I make both kinds, and my grandkids love my kombucha, and my son, my special needs son, who's now 19 years old, he calls it his pop. And it's so healthy for you, and it tastes so good, so yummy, and it's very refreshing. So the recipe on the right, you can see you're going to use 3 to 4 cups of boiling water, 12 black tea bags, or 3 heaping tablespoons of loose black tea. This is for the kombucha tea, the regular black kombucha tea. Or if you're going to make Jun tea, you're going to use 12 green tea bags or 3 heaping tablespoons of loose green tea. And you can purchase the loose green tea, and some of the higher-end supermarkets will carry that. Or you can order your loose teas online. I like to order mine online. I get it from on Amazon, and I get an organic tea from David's, Davids, David's Organic Tea Company. And then you need 1 cup of sugar for your kombucha, your black tea kombucha, or 1 cup of raw honey for your Jun kombucha. And the sweetener that you use in your kombucha is not for you, because what happens is the SCOBY, which you're going to see a picture of pretty quick here, is what eats the sugar. That's what helps the SCOBY grow, and that's what helps the fermentation process to take place. So here I have a picture on the left. I use a 4-cup Pyrex glass measuring cup to make my concentrated tea in. And in that particular one on the left there, that's green tea, 3 heaping tablespoons of green tea in a big muslin tea bag. And then I pour my boiling water over that, leave it sit for 30 to 60 minutes, and then I squeeze it out, and I take it out of there, and that's what I use for the base for my Jun tea. Then on the right side, you can see a picture from the side, what it looks like, and you can also see a jar I have there of green tea mix for Jun tea. And I am going to be telling you in a few moments where you can actually order all kinds of products for making kombucha, my favorite resource. This is what your SCOBY looks like. On the left, if you look around the edge of the rim of this oval, you'll see it's blue. That's because that's my Jun kombucha maker. And by the way, you don't need a kombucha maker to make kombucha. You can do it in a glass, gallon-sized jar. It's just really important that you clean everything you are going to use very thoroughly with soap and water, of course, but then after you rinse it well, you also want to rinse everything that you're using, all of your utensils, your spoons, your vessels, your measuring cup or whatever you're making the tea in, you want to rinse everything with white vinegar because that's going to kill any bacteria that will interfere with the proper fermentation of the scobies. But the one on the left there is a Jun SCOBY. That's for making the Jun tea with green tea and raw honey. And on the right, you can see a kombucha SCOBY with black tea. You can actually see the tea around the edge of it. And a SCOBY is kind of, it's a disc shape. It's kind of wet and slimy kind of feeling. But that's what you use to make your kombucha. And it's interesting if you look up the history, which you can do at the website I'm going to give you in a few minutes here for kombucha supplies. It's interesting because the history of the SCOBYs and kombucha, it comes from China. And they actually used to keep the SCOBY alive by carrying it next to their body. They would keep it warm by keeping it next to their body. And then they would, make their tea, and they would put the SCOBY in there and let it ferment. So what you're going to do is you're going to rinse all your equipment with white vinegar, and you can kind of see on the left there, rinse all your equipment with white vinegar. Oh, and by the way, at the top of this page is kombuchacamp.com. If you want to write that down, kombuchacamp.com. That is where I get all my kombucha supplies. And there's a history of kombucha that you can read there. You can buy continual kombucha maker pots like I have, or you can buy your teas there. You can even buy sugar, like organic sugar. There's all kinds of supplies there. But the first thing you want to do is rinse all your equipment with white vinegar. Then you're going to pour your boiling water over your tea and steep it for 20 to 30 minutes. I'm sorry, I think I said 30 to 60 minutes before. No, it's 20 to 30 minutes. Then you're going to take your tea bags out and add a cup of sugar for your black tea kombucha, or you're going to add a cup of raw honey for your Jun kombucha tea. And you're going to mix it really well till it's dissolved, and then you're going to cool it to room temperature. Because if you put it in with your SCOBY when it's too warm, it'll kill the SCOBY. So you don't want to put it in there when it's too warm. Then you will pour all of this mixture into your glass gallon jar or your kombucha maker vessel with your SCOBY. And you're going to add enough water to bring it up to 1 full gallon. And you're just going to put the lid on it and ferment it for 10 days to 2 weeks. Now, if you have a warm kitchen, like it's summertime, it's going to take less time to ferment. So you're going to want to taste it. After you make this initial batch, you can taste it after probably, if it's a warm environment, like it's summertime and it's really hot outside and your kitchen's warm, I would say after 4 or 5 days, you can take a little sip of the kombucha each day to see what it tastes like. And what you want to achieve is a fermenty type of a refreshing drink. And it shouldn't be real sweet. It can have a little bit of sweetness to it, but you want it to eat as much of that sweetness as possible, that sugar or tea or that honey that you've put into it, so that it ferments really well. And when you take it out of the continual kombucha maker, it's going to be a little bit bubbly. And I'm going to show you a picture of that in just a minute here. It's going to have bubbles on the top with a very tangy taste. So that's what you want to achieve, a kind of a tangy taste. And then there's a second, that's called your first brew. And then you could do, if you choose to flavor it, you can do a second brew. And I'm going to talk about that here in just a minute. Anyway, you could see step 1, 2, 3, and 4. Step 1, rinse your equipment with vinegar. Step 2, pour your boiling water over your tea. Steep it for 20 to 30 minutes. Step 3, add your sugar or honey. Step 4, pour into a gallon glass jar or kombucha maker vessel. And then you're going to make sure you add enough water to it. Now, and make sure you use purified water, reverse osmosis water, or you could use distilled water. Do not use tap water. You might kill your SCOBY. So, especially if you have chlorinated water, you will probably kill your SCOBY. So you don't want to use tap water. But you bring up the level in your jar or your kombucha maker to 1 gallon. Now, I'm going to talk about the second ferment. So after you've let your kombucha, your first ferment, go for a week to 10 days, depending on the warmth of your kitchen. Once you've gotten it to the point that you want it to taste like, a little bit, it's bubbly and a little bit tangy. And if you want to flavor it, this is how I flavor mine. You can see I have 5 jars there, and I have put fruit in the bottom of each jar. I like to use berries. I use cranberries, blueberries, strawberries. In these particular jars, I put kiwi. You can see a little bit of kiwi cut up in there. I do have grapes in some of those jars. So you can use just about any fruit you would choose to use. I will warn you, though, that if you just use blueberries ferment very quickly and they're very sweet. So you might have an explosion if you don't make sure to burp the top of your jars every day. So what I do is I put about half a cup to anywhere from half a cup to 2/3 of a cup or so of fruit in the bottom. These particular jars are a little bit bigger, and I can actually do a whole cup full of fruit if I want to. In the winter months, I use frozen berries, but in the summer months, sometimes our family goes blueberry picking, and I'll use the fresh berries. I do have a strawberry patch, so I can use fresh strawberries. You can use fresh fruit. There's no reason it has to be frozen. But as I said, you can use whatever kind of fruit you want to flavor your kombucha with. So you put your fruit in the bottom, and then you're going to pour your kombucha over the top of that fruit, and you're going to put a lid on it. And it doesn't have to be sealed tight. Those particular lids that you see on there, those don't seal really tightly because these are older containers, and the seals are kind of getting worn. But it doesn't matter if it's sealed really tightly or not for this second brew. And then you can see a little bit better picture of my jars and what they look like before I fill them with the kombucha. And sometimes if you have a continual brew kombucha maker, you might get a little piece of SCOBY that'll break off. And when you're taking the kombucha out to put it in your second ferment, it'll get plugged with a little piece of SCOBY. So you can either press up and down with your finger over the opening when you've got the spigot open, or if it doesn't open up, you can reach inside. You got to rinse your hand and forearm with white vinegar first, so you don't put any foreign bacteria into your kombucha. But you reach inside and you can unclog the spout with your finger. Pull the SCOBY out of there and get it out of the way, because sometimes the SCOBY will kind of block your valves. But you can see in that measuring cup there's bubbles. It's got lots of bubbles on the top, and that's what you want. You want it tangy and bubbly. And you always keep your brew in a darkened vessel. So if you're using a gallon-sized clear jar, you want to keep it in a cabinet away from the light, or you want to keep it wrapped with a towel. Continual brew kombucha makers are already, it's dark inside of them, so you don't have to worry about it. But you want to keep a breathable cover over your kombucha, your kombucha vessel, whether it's a jar or whether it's continual brew. You want to keep a breathable cover. And if you don't have a breathable cover and you're using a regular lid, like a jar, gallon-sized jar with a regular lid, you want to loosen that lid once a day to let the the gas out. And here again is another picture of this blue cup that I'm putting the kombucha in. And it's very foamy, as you can see, very bubbly on the top. And on the right side, you see a little tiny piece of SCOBY in that cup on the right side, kind of towards the top. And all you have to do is just fish that out with a little, tea strainer or something. Just fish it out of there. It's not going to hurt anything. And I have chickens, so I can give, like if I have a SCOBY that goes bad or something, I can give it to my chickens, and they love it, and they'll eat it. So, or you can throw it in the compost. That's fine too. But this is how I fill my jars with fruit for the second ferment. So the first ferment is anywhere from a week to 10 days. Could be a little shorter if you have a really hot kitchen. The second ferment is anywhere from 2 to 3 days. So this is a process. But the drink is outstanding. Oh. And here's another picture of, on the right, my jars with the fruit that I filled with the kombucha. And then on the very far right, that is what your final product looks like. And both pictures on the far right, you can see the beautiful red color. The two bottles on the far right there in the second picture don't look quite as red. And I believe that those two I made a root beer flavoring, which I got the recipe for that from kombuchacamp.com. So you can get really creative and make different kinds of flavors. And I have a fancy bottle with red dots on it there on the left. You can see that. That was a wine bottle that I saved. And it had a flip top with a sealed lid, which is what you want to put your fruit-flavored kombucha into for the third brew. The first brew is in the kombucha pot, whether it be the continuous flow or the gallon-sized jar. The second brew is with your fruit, if you choose to flavor it. Some people like to just use a little bit of liquid stevia to flavor theirs, and they don't even care about putting fruit and going through a second ferment. Whatever you want to do, it's up to you. You're still going to get the nutrient benefits of the probiotics. And what's really cool is this is a wild ferment. It's a wild probiotic. They call it a wild ferment, a wild probiotic. So it's giving a different kind of probiotic, feeding your gut with a different kind of probiotic. And each vegetable that you ferment, by the way, gives you a different kind of probiotic. So that's really cool, and it's good to eat different kind of ferments. It's recommended, actually, in the functional world to try to eat a fermented food with every meal. So, and it doesn't have to be a lot. It can only be, 2 or 3 tablespoons. Or like if you're eating fermented carrots, just eat a couple of fermented carrot sticks. You want to just continually be feeding your body with ferments to keep your microbiome working well. So what you do to make your third ferment is you strain the fruit out of the bottles with the fruit. You pour it through a strainer, strain it out, and then you're going to pour that into those bottles with the flip top, with the rubber seal flip top. Once you get them in those bottles, you still have to keep everything in the dark when it's fermenting. But once you get them in those bottles, you've got to keep a close eye on it because that pressure builds up pretty fast in those bottles. Check it every day, burp it every day, and usually it's 2 to 3 days in the final third ferment. And then you've got yourself your quote-unquote final product, your pop. Your kombucha pop, as my son calls it. So you're going to have all kinds of fun with different flavors of fruit and experimenting, and I just love my ferments. So once again, the handout for this can be found, PDF handout for the recipes can be found underneath this video if you're at my website, healthyparentshappyfamilies.com. or if you're viewing this video live in a group or by yourself, you can contact me at my website, healthyparentshappyfamilies.com, if you would like a copy of the recipes from this video, or if you are in a group setting, there may be somebody handing out the recipe pages to you in print. And I also encourage you to check out my team website. I work with an absolutely beautiful team of women who are very wonderful Catholic Christian women at healthfamilylife.com. And we offer our gifts that the Lord has given each of us to help others grow in body, mind, and spirit, to grow their health. And there are a team of us there's a group of us on our team who pray with others over the phone. If anyone is in need of prayer for healing, we are part of an Unbound ministry program, and we love to pray with people because our bodies, minds, and spirits are all one, as we know. And you can't heal one part without the other. You got to be healed in all three of those areas. And people need to understand that spiritual healing is very important. As a matter of fact, I almost dare to say that the physical and emotional healing cannot come unless there's spiritual healing first. So I encourage you to check out both my websites, my personal website, healthyparentshappyfamilies.com. Feel free to check out the videos there and the free webinars and all of the PDF files that I have posted there, as well as contacting me if you'd like some help with functional nutrition. That is my certification is in functional nutrition. And my second website, my team website, is healthfamilylife.com. And check that out too. Meet the beautiful women that I work with. And if you'd like to come and work with our team, helping other people regain their health in body, mind, and spirit, there's an option available for that as well. And I hope everyone has a blessed day.